Gaylord Perry, Hall of Famer. He was known for cheating all the time.
Never seen anyone throw that hard, that easy.
Those 2 runs that scored will be unearned because of the error.
Swing and a miss!
For me personally, I was really looking forward to him being here, and I'm sure Cleveland as well. I know the fans, they always loved the way he played. And
baseball is supposed to be the pure game. 9 innings, 4 bases, 3 strikes. The rules are simple and fair. The competition is honest, or at least that is what we want to believe. But when someone points at a player and yells, "He's a cheater," everything changes. The game we love gets twisted into something unrecognizable. The purity vanishes. Ron Darling spent his entire career watching players bend every rule they could find. He saw pitchers turn baseballs into weapons with sandpaper and glue. He watched hitters stuff their bats with cork and rubber. He witnessed the game he loved being corrupted from the inside out, and now he is ready to break it all down for everyone to see. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons.
The 6 biggest cheaters in baseball history did not just break rules to win games, they changed how the entire sport is played. They forced the league into new enforcement protocols. They destroyed trust between players and umpires, and they left scars on the game that still affect how baseball operates today. How did they even get away with this on live TV? Picture this scene for a moment. It is the middle of a major league game at Comiskey Park. A relief pitcher is crawling through the stadium ceiling with a flashlight clenched between his teeth, sweat dripping down his face, dust everywhere in the cramped space, chunks of ceiling tile falling onto the floor below him, all to steal back a corked bat before the league could saw it in half and expose the fraud. That actually happened in July of 1994. And it is just one story in a shadow history of deception that runs through every single era of this sport. From the dead ball era to the steroid scandal, cheating has been the second narrative. The story nobody wants to tell, but everyone needs to hear. The underbelly of America's pastime. Before we go any further, if you love exposing the truth about how players cheat the game, tap the hype feature right now and give this video some hype while we dig into the wildest scandals baseball has ever seen. These stories deserve to be told. They need to be remembered. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. Baseball has a second history that runs underneath the box scores and championship banners. Ron Darling calls it the Shadow Chronicle. It is a dark timeline of foreign substances and doctored equipment, of pitchers who turned their fingers into sandpaper factories, of hitters who turned their wooden bats into science experiments. The league has always been one step behind the cheaters. Every single time officials close one loophole, someone finds a new one. Every time they write a stricter rule, someone figures out how to bend it. Gamesmanship is just a polite word for what is really happening here. Plain old cheating, systematic deception, fraud. And the cheaters that Ron Darling identified did not just win a few extra games for themselves. They forced the entire sport into a never-ending cycle of inspections and ejections and suspensions that fundamentally changed the rhythm of the game itself. They made umpires into detectives carrying evidence bags. They turned baseball equipment into courtroom exhibits. They poisoned the well of trust that makes competition meaningful and fair. What follows is the taxonomy of subterfuge that Darling has laid out. 6 players who represent the full evolution of cheating, from crude spitballs in the early days to high-tech bat modifications in the modern era, plus 2 more who perfected the dark art so well they almost never got caught with physical evidence. These are the stories that changed baseball forever. The critical moments when the sport had to look in the mirror and decide what kind of game it wanted to be going forward. Number 6. Albert Belle and the Night Baseball became a heist movie. July 15th, 1994, Comiskey Park in Chicago. Bottom of the first inning. Cleveland Indians slugger Albert Belle steps to the plate against the White Sox. Chicago manager Gene Lamont is watching intently from the dugout. Something about the sound of Belle's bat does not sit right with him. That crack is too loud, too sharp, too distinct, too perfect. Lamont has been in baseball long enough to know when something is off. When the physics do not match the eye test, he walks straight to home plate and challenges the bat. Umpire Dave Phillips does not hesitate for even a second. He confiscates the bat immediately and locks it in the umpire's room for safekeeping until after the game. Play continues. But back in the Cleveland clubhouse, panic is setting in fast. The Indians know they have a massive problem. That bat is corked, stuffed with compressed cork to make it lighter, and if the league saws it open in a lab, Belle is finished. Not just for 10 games. His reputation, his legacy. His entire Hall of Fame caliber career will have a permanent asterisk next to it. The whole baseball world will know he cheated. The team holds an emergency meeting in the clubhouse. This is not just about protecting one player anymore. This is about the franchise. Bell is their best hitter by far, their offensive engine, the middle of their lineup. They cannot afford to lose him for any length of time. Someone has to get that bat back before the league can inspect it. Someone has to volunteer for an insane mission. Relief pitcher Jason Grimsley steps forward. He knows the layout of Comiskey Park from previous visits, and he has a plan that sounds completely absurd. Grimsley climbs up into the false ceiling above the Indians' clubhouse. It is a tight, cramped space, barely enough room to crawl. He puts a flashlight in his mouth because he needs both hands completely free. Then he starts crawling through the infrastructure, pipes and electrical wires everywhere around him, dust falling with every single movement he makes. The ceiling panels flex and creak under his body weight. He is navigating purely by memory and desperation and hope. One wrong turn and he is lost forever in the guts of a major league stadium. One loud noise and security is on top of him, but Grimsley keeps moving forward, inch by painful inch, crawling through the pitch, dark towards the umpire's room. He finally reaches the right spot. He can see light bleeding through the cracks in the ceiling panels below. This is it. This is the room. He very carefully removes one tile and drops down into the umpire's room. The bat is right there on the wooden table, sitting in plain view like a trophy waiting to be claimed. He grabs it immediately. Then he pulls out the replacement bat he brought with him on the mission. It belongs to teammate Paul Sorrento. Standard issue from the factory, completely clean, no cork, no modifications of any kind. Grimsley makes the swap in seconds. Bell's illegal bat goes back up through the ceiling with him. Sorrento's legal bat stays behind on the table. Grimsley climbs back up into the ceiling and crawls the entire distance back to the safety of the clubhouse. The whole operation takes maybe 15 or 20 minutes from start to finish. Mission accomplished. Or so he thinks in that moment of relief. The umpires return to their room after the game ends. They immediately notice something is very wrong. There are chunks of ceiling tile scattered all across the floor. The bat sitting on the table looks completely different. The finish is not the same quality. The polish is wrong, and when they check the name branded on the barrel, it does not match the confiscated bat at all. They have been robbed during a major league game, and they know exactly who is responsible. The league goes absolutely nuclear. Major League Baseball threatens to involve the FBI in a criminal investigation. This is not just about cheating at sports anymore. Breaking into an umpire's room during an official game is burglary. It is trespassing. It is a potential federal crime. The Indians realize they are in way over their heads. They panic and return the original bat to league officials. The league takes Bell's bat to a proper laboratory. They X-ray it first using hospital equipment. The images show clear dark shadows inside the wooden barrel. Cork. Compressed cork stuffed deep into the wood to reduce weight and increase bat speed through the hitting zone. Then they saw the bat completely in half with cameras rolling. The physical evidence is absolutely undeniable. Bell gets hit with a 10-game suspension from the commissioner. The league later reduces it to just 7 games on appeal, but the damage to his reputation is permanent and irreversible. This is not just a player caught with an illegal bat. This is a player whose entire team launched a coordinated heist operation to cover up the crime. The scandal explodes across every single sports page in America for weeks. Teammate Omar Vizquel makes everything infinitely worse. He tells reporters years later in interviews that all of Bell's bats were corked, every single one in his locker. Bell did not cork just one special bat for one important game. He corked his entire arsenal systematically. The whole operation was organized fraud from top to bottom. Bell never publicly admitted it. He maintained his complete denial until the very end of his career. But the physical evidence spoke much louder than his words ever could, and the Batgate incident became the single defining moment of his entire career. Not his monster power numbers, not his incredible run production. The heist, the ceiling crawl caught on camera, the corked bat sawed in half for television. The Batgate incident changed baseball forever in tangible ways. Before 1994, bat storage protocols were extremely casual. Players could grab whatever bat they wanted from the rack without anyone tracking it. Equipment managers did not keep detailed records or serial numbers. Security personnel did not monitor who had access to what. After Batgate, absolutely everything changed overnight. the league installed strict new protocols. Every bat had to be registered before games with unique identifiers. Each one was cataloged in a database. Security started using X-ray scanning technology to check bats completely at random. Surprise inspections became absolutely routine, and umpires started watching players much more carefully during actual games. The trust was completely gone. Bell's ceiling crawl heist was so brazen and so incredibly stupid that it forced the entire sport to treat equipment like evidence in a murder trial. Baseball had to protect itself from its own players. The age of casual honor system was dead. Number 5. Mike Scott and the playoff nightmare that still haunts the Mets. 1986 National League Championship Series. The mighty New York Mets versus the Houston Astros. The Mets come into this series as overwhelming favorites. They have the single best offense in all of baseball, power from the top to the bottom of the batting order. They averaged over 4.5 runs per game during the entire regular season. Nobody can stop this lineup. Nobody except Mike Scott. Game 1 at the massive Astrodome in Houston, October 8th. Scott takes the mound and the Mets suddenly look completely and utterly helpless at the plate. His splitter is absolutely unhittable. It dives straight down like a stone dropping off a steep cliff. It darts violently sideways at the very last possible second. 14 total strikeouts. Complete game shutout. The Astros win 1-0. Ron Darling is sitting in that dugout watching his teammates swing helplessly through pitches they cannot even begin to track properly. Swing and miss, over and over again. It is absolutely humiliating for professional hitters. After the game ends, something feels deeply wrong to the Mets. Players start comparing detailed notes in the clubhouse. The ball was moving way differently than it should move naturally. The break was far too sharp, far too violent, too late. They start methodically collecting baseballs from the game. They find 8 different balls that all have completely identical scuff marks. Each one has a rough patch the size of an actual 50-cent piece. Same exact location every single time without fail. Far too consistent to be simple natural wear from normal play. Manager Davey Johnson immediately knows what he is looking at. Physical evidence. Proof. He brings all 8 balls to the waiting reporters after Game 4. He holds them up high for all the cameras. The scuffs are completely obvious to everyone. You can see them clearly from all the way across the crowded room. The message is absolutely crystal clear. Mike Scott is systematically scuffing the baseball, and he is doing it on purpose. The theory makes perfect scientific sense. If you roughen just one side of the ball with an abrasive tool, you create severely uneven drag through the air. The perfectly smooth side moves cleanly through the atmosphere. The artificially rough side catches wind and tumbles chaotically. When you throw a splitter grip with that scuffed spot positioned exactly right, the ball does not just drop normally. It violently explodes downward. The movement is not natural at all. It is completely manufactured. Manufactured with hidden sandpaper somewhere on Scott's uniform or tucked into his glove. The Mets are absolutely convinced. The hard evidence is sitting right there in Johnson's hands. 8 mutilated baseballs, but the league does absolutely nothing to stop it. National League President Chub Feeney makes a carefully worded public statement. He says he will watch Scott very closely going forward, but he flat out refuses to formally accuse him without definitive proof of the act. Innocent until proven guilty, he says. It sounds perfectly fair and reasonable, but it completely ignores the overwhelming physical evidence that Johnson just presented to the world. 8 mutilated baseballs from just 2 games. That is not a random coincidence. That is a clear, systematic pattern. Umpire Doug Harvey is the crew chief for the entire series. He personally inspects Mike Scott before Game 4 starts. He carefully checks his glove, his cap, his belt, his pockets. He finds absolutely nothing. No sandpaper, no emery board, no illegal tools of any kind. Scott is far too smart to ever get caught with actual physical evidence in his possession, so Harvey officially clears him to pitch, and Scott proceeds to dominate again. Just 3 hits allowed, 1 run, 5 more strikeouts. The Astros win 3-1. The Mets are absolutely desperate by this point. They genuinely feel like they are facing a loaded weapon every single time Mike Scott takes that mound. Hitters start guessing wildly at the plate. They completely lose confidence in their normal approach. The entire lineup is trapped inside Scott's head before he even delivers the very first pitch. It is pure psychological warfare, and it is working perfectly. The fear of the scuffed ball is almost as devastatingly effective as the actual scuffed ball itself. Batters cannot properly focus on the strike zone because they are obsessing over whether this specific pitch is doctored or clean. Their timing mechanics fall completely apart. Scott is beating them mentally long before the ball even crosses home plate. Scott himself plays the entire situation absolutely perfectly. He never directly admits to scuffing baseballs, but he also never denies that the balls themselves are scuffed either. His public explanation is a complete masterpiece of careful evasion. He calmly tells reporters that every single ball that hits the ground during a game has something on it: dirt, grass stains, normal wear from impact. So yes, he readily admits he throws balls that are visibly scuffed, but he is definitely not admitting that he is personally the one doing the actual scuffing. Technically true, functionally a confession. The Mets know with certainty he is cheating. The league officials know he is cheating. Every single manager in the National League knows he is cheating. But nobody can definitively prove it in that exact moment, and without ironclad proof, Scott just keeps pitching. Game 6 goes an absolutely grueling 16 full innings. The Mets finally win in exhaustion. It becomes one of the greatest playoff games in the entire history of baseball. But for the Mets players, the celebration is about far more than just winning one game. It is about pure survival. Because winning Game 6 means they successfully avoid facing Mike Scott in a decisive Game 7. Ron Darling later calls it a reprieve from execution, a pardon from death row. If the Mets had lost Game 6, they would have been forced to face Scott one final time. And they genuinely believed deep down they could not beat him. Not when he had sandpaper, not when the league was actively letting him get away with it. The psychological damage was far too severe. The Mets felt like helpless lambs being led to slaughter every single time Scott was on the mound. That is the real, insidious power of cheating. It is not just about winning one individual game. It is about systematically breaking the other team's will to compete at all, making them doubt themselves constantly, making them question all their preparation and scouting, making them feel like the entire game is permanently rigged against them. The Mets go on to win the World Series later that October, but the Mike Scott chapter haunts them forever. They never got any justice. Scott never got caught. He never faced any punishment. He won the prestigious Cy Young Award that same year. His career flourished massively while the Mets were left wondering what that series would have looked like if the league had actually enforced its own rules. The complete institutional failure to properly police Mike Scott is the absolute core of Darling's critique. The sport had overwhelming evidence sitting right in front of officials. 8 scuffed baseballs with completely identical markings, but it deliberately chose neutrality over actual enforcement. It chose to protect one pitcher's reputation over competitive integrity. And that cowardly choice poisoned the entire series. The 1986 NLCS will always have a permanent asterisk in the minds of every player who lived through it. They know what really happened. They know Mike Scott cheated his way to complete dominance. And they know the league let it happen because confronting it would have been too messy, too controversial. Far easier to just look the other way and let the cheater walk free. Number 4. Joe Niekro and the Emery board that fell from the sky. August 3rd, 1987. Anaheim Stadium in California. Minnesota Twins versus California Angels. Veteran knuckleballer Joe Niekro is on the mound for Minnesota. He is 42 years old at this point, a crafty pitcher who has made an entire long career out of deception and movement. 4th inning. Home plate umpire Tim Cheetah starts noticing something very strange. The baseballs coming back to him from the catcher all have fresh gouges on them. Not normal wear, not the usual nicks and scuffs from hitting the dirt. Deep cuts, fresh scratches. The kind of specific damage that absolutely does not happen naturally during normal play. Cheetah shows the suspicious balls to the rest of the umpiring crew. They all see it immediately. Something is definitely wrong here. They decide to inspect Niekro directly on the mound. Angels manager Gene Mauch is watching carefully from the dugout. He is not even slightly surprised by the inspection. He tells reporters after the game that nobody in baseball ever suspected Joe Niekro of scuffing. Everybody always knew it. The entire league was in on the open secret. Niekro had been doctoring baseballs for many years. Veterans around the league knew it. Managers knew it. Umpires almost certainly suspected it, but nobody had ever caught him completely red-handed before. Until this exact moment. The umpires walk slowly to the mound, all four of them together. Niekro sees them coming and knows exactly what is about to happen. They tell him firmly to empty his pockets. Show us what you have. Niekro raises both hands high in the air like he is surrendering to police, like he is the innocent victim of some terrible misunderstanding. Then he does something that gets replayed endlessly on highlight reels for the next several decades. He flicks an emery board casually onto the grass, just tosses it away like it is a worthless piece of trash. Casual. Like nobody will notice what just happened. The umpires see it immediately. They pick it up. Then they keep searching him. They find a separate piece of sandpaper. It is carefully cut and shaped perfectly to fit around a finger, contoured, custom made specifically for scuffing baseballs without easy detection. Joe Niekro has been caught completely red-handed on national television. Network cameras captured absolutely everything. The toss, the recovery, the physical evidence. Years later, umpire Tim Cheetah reveals the full story in a detailed interview. What the television cameras did not show was even more devious. Niekro was not just carrying sandpaper in his uniform pocket. He had actually glued a piece of sandpaper directly to his palm. Then he carefully covered it with makeup or flesh-colored paint to make it blend in perfectly with his natural skin. From any distance, it looked like part of his actual hand. When the umpires walked out to inspect him, Niekro immediately realized he was caught. So he desperately tried to peel the sandpaper off his palm while pretending to empty his pockets. He was literally picking at his own hand, trying frantically to get rid of the real evidence. That is why he flicked the emery board onto the grass. It was a deliberate distraction, misdirection. Give the umps something obvious to find while he works the actual evidence off his skin. The plan fails spectacularly. The umpires eject Niekro from the game immediately. The evidence is completely overwhelming. Emery board, pocket sandpaper, and the scratched balls in Cheetah's pouch. Niekro tries desperately to mount a defense. He claims he absolutely needs the filing tools to properly maintain his fingernails for his knuckleball. Knuckleball pitchers rely on very precise nail length and shape to get the grip exactly right, so carrying an emery board actually makes sense. It is a reasonable explanation, except for one massive problem: the sandpaper. You do not need sandpaper shaped to fit your finger to file your nails. That is not nail maintenance equipment. That is ball scuffing equipment. Plain and simple. American League President Bobby Brown does not buy the defense at all. 10-game suspension. Niekro appeals the decision but loses. The penalty stands. The scandal turns Niekro into a national punchline overnight. He goes on Late Night with David Letterman a few weeks later. He wears a tool belt filled with carpenter's equipment. He carries a power sander. The audience laughs. Letterman jokes about it. Niekro is trying to own the scandal, turn it into comedy, make himself the guy who can laugh at his own mistakes. But the damage is already done permanently. The image of the crafty veteran has been replaced forever by the image of a desperate cheater caught in the act, the emery board hitting the grass. That is Joe Niekro's legacy now. The Niekro incident matters because of the visual spectacle. This was not a rumor, not an allegation, not a he said, she said situation. This was a televised ejection with actual physical evidence. Cameras caught the whole thing live. Millions of people watched it happen in real time. The emery board flying through the air, umpires holding up the sandpaper for everyone to see. Before August 3, 1987, ball doctoring existed in the shadows. Veterans did it quietly. Umps looked the other way. After Niekro, it became a public scandal. The league could not ignore it anymore because the entire country had just watched a pitcher cheat on live national television. The secret was finally out. Number 3. Kevin Gross and the sandpaper glove that ended all denial. 1 week after Joe Niekro gets caught on national television, history repeats itself in almost identical fashion. August 10, 1987. Philadelphia Phillies pitcher Kevin Gross takes the mound against the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field. Cubs manager Gene Michael has been watching Gross very carefully for weeks now. He has suspicions that have been building over multiple games. The ball moves differently when Gross pitches compared to other pitchers. The break is too sharp, too late. The movement does not look natural at all. Michael knows what to look for. He has been around baseball long enough to spot the telltale signs of ball doctoring. Before this game even starts, he alerts the umpires in the clubhouse. Watch his glove carefully. Pay close attention to how he grips the ball. Something is definitely not right with Kevin Gross and his pitching. The umpires take Michael's warning very seriously given what just happened with Joe Niekro 1 week earlier. The league is on high alert now. They wait for the right moment during the game. Then they converge on the mound and demand to inspect Gross's equipment. They carefully flip his glove completely inside out, and there it is right in front of them. A strip of sandpaper glued directly to the heel of the glove, not hidden in some secret compartment, not cleverly disguised, just glued right there where Gross can easily rub the ball against it every single time he reaches into his mitt. The evidence could not possibly be more clear and undeniable. Kevin Gross has been systematically manufacturing artificial movement with friction and abrasion. The investigation into Gross's motives reveals a sad and common pattern among veteran cheaters. Kevin Gross used to throw significantly harder earlier in his career. He had genuine natural velocity on his fastball. But age and wear caught up with him like it does to every pitcher eventually. Reports indicate he had lost approximately 5 to 6 miles per hour on his fastball over recent seasons. Without that natural speed, his pitches became flat and very hittable. So, he turned to sandpaper to artificially create the movement he no longer had naturally from his arm. It is the tragic story of a declining player desperately trying to cheat father time, trying to extend a career well past its natural expiration date through fraud. Commissioner Bart Giamatti hands down a 10-game suspension immediately, exactly the same penalty as Joe Niekro received, back-to-back nearly identical incidents in the span of just one single week. The league is sending an unmistakable message to every pitcher in baseball. The era of winking at ball doctoring is completely over. Zero tolerance starts right now. Giamatti wants umpires to be extremely aggressive going forward, inspect gloves without hesitation, check pockets, confiscate suspicious balls. The sport is entering a fundamentally new phase of strict enforcement. No more looking the other way. The Kevin Gross suspension matters enormously because it removes any remaining ambiguity about intent. Joe Niekro could at least attempt to claim the emery board was for nail maintenance, even though nobody believed it. Gaylord Perry could always claim his ritual touching was just mind games, but Kevin Gross had sandpaper permanently glued to his actual playing equipment. There is absolutely no gray area left, no possible room for interpretation. It is pure systematic fraud caught red-handed, and the 10-game penalty immediately becomes the new standard for getting caught doctoring. The message is clear. Cheat, and you lose nearly 2 weeks of your season. Number 2. Gaylord Perry and the spitball as psychological warfare. Gaylord Perry is the absolute godfather of modern pitching deception. He is the architect of the contemporary era of ball doctoring. The spitball was officially banned way back in 1920. The league gave a grandfather clause protecting active spitball pitchers until 1934. Then it disappeared completely from baseball for multiple decades. Gaylord Perry brought it roaring back to life, and he turned the illegal pitch into a sophisticated art form that went far beyond simple mechanics. 1967. The league passes a brand new rule specifically targeting spitball pitchers. Pitchers can no longer touch their mouths while standing on the mound. The change is aimed directly at pitchers like Perry who load up saliva, so Perry adapts immediately. He spends an entire winter practicing elaborate new routines in front of a mirror at home. He develops complex decoy moves designed specifically to hide the exact moment he actually loads the ball, touches his cap repeatedly, rubs his jersey, scratches his belt, wipes his forehead. Every single motion is carefully choreographed to obscure the real action. The routine becomes a performance, and that performance becomes the actual weapon. Perry uses Vaseline or other slippery lubricants instead of just saliva. The substance dramatically reduces friction on one targeted side of the ball. When he releases the pitch, the ball tumbles chaotically instead of spinning cleanly through the air. The movement is completely unstable. It darts and dives unpredictably in multiple directions. Modern splitters can create somewhat similar action. But Perry's version is far more extreme and violent because the ball itself is physically compromised. The aerodynamics are intentionally broken. The absolute genius of Perry's method is not just the mechanical advantage he gains, it is deeply psychological too. Hitters spend the entire at-bat obsessively watching his hands, staring at his fingers, trying desperately to figure out which specific pitch is loaded and which is clean. They completely lose focus on reading the actual strike zone properly. They stop tracking the ball cleanly out of his hand. Their timing mechanics fall apart. Perry grins at them from the mound. A knowing poker player's smirk. He knows they are already mentally beaten before he even releases the pitch. The paranoia is doing half his work for him. Opposing managers complain constantly and loudly. They demand inspections before games. Umpires dutifully check Perry's hat and glove and uniform. They find absolutely nothing every single time. Perry is far too careful and experienced. He hides the evidence far too well, and even when he does not actually load the ball on a particular pitch, the threat alone is enough. Hitters automatically assume every single pitch is doctored. The paranoia works completely in Perry's favor. He gets easy outs on straight fastballs because batters are sitting on the spitter. It is gamesmanship elevated to absolute genius level. Ron Darling calls Gaylord Perry the performance artist of cheating. He made the elaborate ritual part of the actual strategy. All the touching and wiping and grinning. It was pure theater designed to mess with minds. And it worked flawlessly for over 2 full decades. Perry retired with 314 career wins and a Hall of Fame plaque in Cooperstown. The entire sport knew he cheated systematically. Everybody knew. But the league could never prove it consistently enough to stop him permanently. That makes him the most successful cheater on this entire list. He got away with it completely from start to finish. From his first game to his last, never suspended, never caught, never punished, just inducted into the Hall of Fame as one of the greatest pitchers ever. Number 1. Greg Nettles and the Super Balls that bounced into history. 1974, Shea Stadium in New York. Doubleheader between the New York Yankees and the Detroit Tigers, 5th inning of the second game. Yankees third baseman Greg Nettles steps confidently to the plate. He makes solid contact with the pitch. The bat shatters on impact. And then something absolutely surreal happens that nobody could have predicted. 6 bright Super Balls spill out onto the field, high bounce rubber balls rolling and bouncing everywhere. Tigers catcher Bill Freehand just stares in complete disbelief, his jaw hanging open. Umpires scramble frantically to collect all the evidence bouncing around. The crowd absolutely erupts. Nobody has ever seen anything remotely like this in a major league game. Nettles' explanation for the bizarre incident is as wild as the incident itself. He claims that a fan in Chicago gave him the modified bat as a gift for good luck. He says he picked it up by complete mistake before the game because it looked very similar to his regular bat. The story is absolutely ridiculous on its face, but it is also completely impossible to disprove now. The bat is already broken into pieces. The Super Balls are already scattered across the field. There is no denying the physical evidence at all, but Nettles keeps insisting loudly it was just an innocent accident. The theory behind stuffing Super Balls into a bat is genuinely bizarre. The idea is to create a trampoline effect inside the hollow wood. When the pitched ball makes contact with the bat, the rubber balls inside compress from the impact and then bounce back instantly. That extra spring action is supposedly designed to add extra pop to the contact, add significant distance to fly balls. Whether it actually works in practice is highly debatable. Physics experts have questioned it, but the intent to deceive and gain an unfair advantage is absolutely obvious. Nettles loaded that bat deliberately and intentionally, and he actively used it in an official major league game. The twist that makes the story even more outrageous is that Nettles hit a home run earlier in that same exact game with the same exact bat. That homer officially counted in the record books because the bat did not break during that particular plate appearance. There was no evidence exposed, so Nettles got to keep the run. He only got caught when the bat finally shattered and revealed the fraud inside. The league gives him a 10-game suspension for using illegal equipment, but the damage is already done to the integrity of the game. Nettles had been using that bat for who knows how long. The Super Balls are critically important in baseball's cheating history because they show just how creative and desperate players got with bat doctoring over the decades. Cork was extremely common. Drilling out the thick barrel and filling it with much lighter material to dramatically increase bat speed through the hitting zone. but Super Balls are next-level absurd. They represent an attempt to fundamentally change the actual physics of the game itself. And even though it probably did not work effectively in reality, the fact that Greg Nettles even tried it shows how far players were willing to go for absolutely any possible competitive edge. No idea was too crazy. No modification was off-limits. If it might help even slightly, somebody would try it. Whitey Ford took cheating and made it systematic. The career of Whitey Ford offers a contrasting perspective on cheating entirely. For Ford, doctoring the ball was not a desperate act of a declining veteran trying to hang on. It was a core component of a Hall of Fame career with the legendary New York Yankees. Ford later admitted openly to an array of creative techniques. He used a sharpened diamond on his wedding ring to cut precise slices into the baseball. When that ring was discovered by umpires, he transitioned smoothly to using a sharpened belt buckle instead. Same result. Different tool. Problem solved. Ford's most famous invention was gunk, a concoction he personally mixed from baby oil, resin, and turpentine. He would carefully apply this substance to the baseball to dramatically manipulate its movement through the air. Furthermore, Ford's cheating was never a solo operation. It was a collaborative team effort. His catcher, the great Elston Howard, would systematically scuff balls on his shin guard buckles before returning them to the mound. They had it down to a science. In Ford's view, these techniques were not violations of integrity. They were refinements of the pitcher's craft, improvements, advantages. One of his most brazen admissions involved doctoring a ball during the 1962 All-Star Game specifically to strike out Willie Mays. He did it to settle a country club debt with Giants owner Horace Stoneham. That is how casual Ford was about the whole thing. It was not shame, it was pride. Don Sutton never got caught, and that made him the most dangerous. Don Sutton's legacy is defined by a different kind of persistence entirely. Unlike Joe Niekro or Kevin Gross, who got caught with physical tools, Sutton was never once caught with an emery board or sandpaper in his possession. Yet he was perhaps the most frequently accused pitcher of his entire generation. Ron Darling describes Sutton's method as manufacturing the ball, a term that refers to the subtle and continuous degradation of the ball's surface through repeated contact with the glove, the uniform, or various parts of the pitcher's body. Sutton's methods were so refined and practiced that they became nearly invisible to the naked eye and to the close scrutiny of umpires. Sutton's inclusion in the cheaters list highlights the key distinction between event-based cheating and process-based cheating. A corked bat is an event. You either have it or you do not. But manufacturing is a process. It happens gradually over multiple pitches. By avoiding the obvious tools of the trade entirely, Sutton was able to maintain a 300-win career while operating in a permanent state of suspicion. Managers accused him constantly. Umpires watched him closely, but nobody ever found the smoking gun evidence. For Darling, Sutton represents the most successful version of the dark arts, the player who successfully integrates systematic deception into their standard operating procedure without ever providing definitive proof for the league to prosecute. He made the Hall of Fame while everyone knew what he was doing, but knowing and proving are two very different things. The evolution of cheating is an arms race that escalated over decades. The history Darling lays out shows a clear progression. It starts with Gaylord Perry and the old-school spitball, a slippery substance on the fingers. Simple, low-tech, crude, but effective. Then Mike Scott takes it to the next level with sandpaper in the 80s. More aggressive, more effective, more damaging. Then Joe Niekro and Kevin Gross get caught on television with actual tools in their possession. The league cracks down hard. Suspensions become the new normal. Then Albert Bell takes it even further with corked bats, and his team launches a literal heist to cover it up. Each generation of cheaters learns directly from the last. The methods get more sophisticated with each iteration, the technology improves, and the consequences get more severe. The real cost of all this systematic deception is trust. When pitchers doctor the ball, hitters cannot rely on their preparation and scouting. When hitters load their bats illegally, pitchers cannot trust that the game is being played fairly. The competitive balance gets completely skewed. One player with an illegal advantage can change an entire playoff series. Ron Darling watched Mike Scott dominate the Mets in 1986 with scuffed balls. That series is in the official record books as a legitimate playoff, but for the players who actually lived through it, the asterisk is permanent in their minds. They know what really happened, and they know the league deliberately let it happen. The back-to-back 1987 scandals changed umpire behavior forever. Before Necro and Gross, inspections were rare and casual. After those televised incidents, umps became forensic investigators. Ball checks became absolutely routine. Glove inspections slowed down the pace of the game. The rhythm changed, and all because a few pitchers could not resist the edge that sandpaper gave them. The Batgate incident did the exact same thing for bat security. X-rays, registration requirements, strict storage protocols. The sport had to become a surveillance operation, just to keep the cheating manageable. But here is the thing that matters most. The game survived all of it. Baseball learned from every scandal. After every embarrassing incident, the league tightened the rules significantly, made enforcement much stricter, improved the technology. The cheaters actually forced the sport to define its boundaries clearly, to decide what integrity actually means in practice. And in a strange way, that conflict made the game better and stronger. Because now when someone wins, we can trust it more. When a pitcher dominates, we know it is real skill. When a hitter crushes a ball, we know the bat is clean. The age of blatant tool-based cheating is over. The age of accountability and enforcement has begun. The biggest cheaters in baseball history did not just break rules for personal gain, they revealed critical weaknesses in the system. And the sport responded by building a much stronger foundation. Ron Darling's breakdown is not just about naming names and shaming cheaters, it is about understanding how the entire game evolved through conflict and scandal, how integrity became a value truly worth fighting for, and how fans deserve better than watching players cheat their way to victory. The legacy of these cheaters lives on today in every inspection, every bat check, every umpire conference on the mound. They fundamentally changed the infrastructure of the sport. And while their specific methods are gone, the lessons remain forever. Baseball is a game of edges, but those edges have to be earned honestly through skill and preparation. Gaylord Perry earned his edge with elaborate deception. Mike Scott earned his with sandpaper. Albert Bell earned his with cork, and the sport paid a heavy price, but it learned, it adapted, and it kept moving forward towards integrity. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button and subscribe to Baseball Icons. Drop a comment below. Let me know which story shocked you most. Was it the ceiling crawl heist, the Super Balls, or Mike Scott's playoff dominance? Let me know. The game is better when everyone plays fair. Thanks for watching.
It was just trying to understand how hitters see the ball, and then what can I do with the ball to try to trick them. If I'm going to throw a changeup, I know it's not worth it unless I've thrown a low fastball for a strike.
I never told this to anybody, but he called his own pitches.
I think it's pretty amazing how he did it. So how he caught the ball from Eddie determined what the next pitch was going to be.
When he threw that pitch, he go fastball away, fastball inside.
There was nothing better than facing Barry. Me and Barry got to be friends, and so you have that little inner competition.
It's not hard to throw 4 pitches, you know, in the right-handed batter's box.
Greg Maddux exposed the 8 biggest cheaters who ruined the game. And yeah, when fans watched these players destroy records and defy nature, they said it out loud. He is a freaking cheater. While others bulked up in ways that made no biological sense and bent every rule they could find, Maddux stayed clean and proved that intelligence beats artificial power every time. His 355 wins came from a mind sharper than any substance could create. He made cheaters look foolish without saying a word, just by being himself. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. Baseball has always had rule benders: spitballs, scuffed balls, corked bats. That was the old game. Those were individual tricks, small edges guys tried to grab. But something changed fundamentally in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The cheating stopped being individual tricks and became systematic fraud on an industrial scale. Players did not just doctor a ball here and there, they chemically redesigned their entire bodies, using substances that did not show up on tests. They used technology to steal signs in real time, turning the pitcher-hitter battle into a rigged game. The sport itself started to warp under the weight of this deception. Records that seemed impossible for entire generations suddenly fell in a single summer. Pitchers who should have been declining were somehow throwing harder at 45 than they did at 25. Home runs flew out of parks at rates that defied natural human limits. And right in the middle of this chaos stood Greg Maddux, a pitcher throwing 87 miles per hour and dominating hitters who were supposedly superhuman. That contrast told the whole story. If you want to understand the real impact of these cheaters and what they cost the game, hit that hype button right now and give this video some hype. Maddux proved what real greatness looks like when it is built on actual skill instead of shortcuts. These 8 names show exactly what happens when players choose the easy path over the hard one. The gap between them is not just about statistics, it is about legitimacy, integrity, and what it means to truly earn something. And once you lose that legitimacy, you never get it back. Number 8, the 2017 Houston Astros. This one hits different because it happened right in front of our eyes in the modern era. No anonymous surveys that leaked years later, no secret reports that dropped a decade after the fact. The Astros cheated brazenly in 2017 and won a World Series doing it, celebrating on the field while the whole scheme was active. They set up a camera in center field aimed directly at the catcher, positioned perfectly to see every sign. They decoded the signs in real time using video feeds and personnel watching monitors. Then they banged a trash can to tell their hitters exactly what pitch was coming. Bang once for off speed. No bang for fastball. It was that simple, that crude, and that absolutely devastating to the fundamental competition. For a pitcher like Greg Maddux, this form of cheating is actually worse than steroids in many ways. Way worse. Maddux built his entire Hall of Fame career on deception and misdirection. His fastball sat in the mid-80s, while others were regularly hitting high 90s with enhanced velocity. He did not overpower anyone through sheer force. He made hitters guess wrong on every single pitch. He made a pitch look like a strike until it dove out of the zone at the last second. He made a ball look completely hittable until it painted the black corner perfectly. Take away that deception element, and Maddux loses his greatest and most valuable weapon entirely. The trash can banging scheme did exactly that to every pitcher who faced them. It turned every at-bat into a guessing game, where the hitter already knew the answer before the pitch was even thrown. Some people in the research material speculated that if Maddux had faced the Astros during that 2017 season, he would have figured out the scheme between innings because his mind processed information that fast. He would have started changing signs mid-game just to mess with them and expose their system. He would have noticed patterns and blown the whole thing wide open because his baseball intelligence operated on a different level than everyone else. But that is the real tragedy here. Clean players competing fairly should not have to become detectives and investigators just to compete on a level playing field. The consequences eventually came when the scheme was exposed. Manager A.J. Hinch got suspended for the entire 2020 season. General manager Jeff Luhnow got suspended for the same period. Both were fired by the Astros organization shortly after. But here's what made fans absolutely furious and bitter. The players who actually executed the scheme got complete immunity from punishment. Every single player who participated in the trash can banging walked away without any suspensions, fines, or consequences because they agreed to testify and cooperate. No suspensions, no fines, absolutely nothing. The official justification was that Major League Baseball needed their full cooperation to understand the complete scope of the cheating. But to fans watching at home, it felt like the people who actually cheated on the field got rewarded while the coaches and executives took all the fall. The anger has not faded even years later. When the Astros travel to away stadiums now, fans boo relentlessly and mercilessly for 9 full innings. People bring fake trash cans to games and bang on them mockingly. The resentment runs deep and toxic throughout baseball. And it absolutely should. Because unlike steroids, which at least required individual risk and personal commitment to use, the Astros scheme was completely institutional and organizational. It was planned, coordinated, and executed by an entire team working together. They did not just cheat the written rules of baseball, they broke the fundamental contest between pitcher and hitter that the entire sport is built around. That contest is supposed to be simple and pure. I throw, you try to guess what is coming. We see who is smarter and better prepared. The Astros turned it into something completely different and unfair. I throw, you already know exactly what is coming. I lose before the pitch is even released. For a cerebral and intelligent pitcher like Maddux, that is not just unfair competition. It is an insult to everything the game is supposed to represent and stand for. And the absolute worst part of this entire scandal is that the Astros still have their 2017 championship trophy. The title was never vacated or taken away. The championship banners still hang in their stadium. The World Series rings are still worn by players. So the lesson the league sent to everyone was painfully clear. Cheat systematically as an organization, win a championship title, and even if you eventually get caught and exposed, you still keep everything you stole. Now let's establish what clean clean excellence actually looked like during this corrupt era. Greg Maddux played 23 full seasons at the highest level and won 355 games during that span. He won 4 consecutive Cy Young Awards from 1992 to 1995, an absolutely dominant peak. He earned 18 Gold Gloves over his career, which remains a record for any player at any position in baseball history. His career ERA was 3.16, and that number was achieved during one of the highest scoring offensive eras in baseball history when runs were cheap. And he did it all with a fastball that barely touched 88 miles per hour on his best day. While other pitchers were chemically boosting their velocity into the high 90s and even touching 100, Maddux was relying entirely on his brain and his precision. People called him the professor for a very specific reason. His mind processed information faster than anyone else on the field, including hitters and coaches. He studied hitters obsessively like it was a full-time science project. He remembered specific at-bats from years earlier and used that stored memory to set up future confrontations. One particular story captures this mental dominance perfectly. Back in 1993, Dave Martinez got a clutch hit off Maddux in a full count situation with the bases loaded and the game on the line. 7 full years later, the exact same scenario happened again in a game. Same count, same bases loaded situation, same pressure moment. Maddux remembered that 1993 pitch and exactly what Martinez did with it. So this time, 7 years later, he adjusted his approach completely. He threw a different sequence and struck Martinez out to end the threat. That is not physical talent or genetic gifts. That is pure intellectual dominance and commitment to craft. Maddux turned pitching into a chess match where he was always 3 or 4 moves ahead of the hitter. His strikeout to walk ratio of 3.37 over his entire career shows elite precision and control at the highest level. He did not waste pitches unnecessarily. He did not give hitters free passes to first base. Every single throw had a specific purpose in a larger plan. His strategy was built on movement, deception, and narrowing the strike zone psychologically. He made hitters chase pitches they thought were strikes. He threw strikes that looked like balls. He kept them off balance and guessing wrong constantly. The phrase a Maddux became shorthand in baseball for a complete game in under 100 pitches, the ultimate symbol of efficiency and dominance. But even Maddux felt the intense pressure of the steroid era around him. He admitted it directly in later interviews. At one point during his career, his fastball velocity jumped from 87 to 96 miles per hour, and he said openly that he viewed it as not by natural cause. He felt it was a total disadvantage to play completely clean when everyone else was getting artificial help. Think about that reality for a moment. One of the greatest pitchers in baseball history felt like staying clean. Put him at a competitive disadvantage. That tells you exactly how pervasive the culture of cheating had become in baseball. It was not just a few isolated bad apples. It was a systematic problem that made honest players feel like they were losing ground just by following the rules everyone agreed to. Maddux stayed clean anyway despite that pressure, and his career proves beyond any doubt that craft and intelligence can beat chemistry and deception over the long run. But it should not have been that hard or that unfair. The league created an environment where the clean players were effectively penalized and the cheaters were celebrated with attention and contracts. Maddux won anyway, but imagine how much greater he could have been if he did not have to fight uphill against artificially enhanced competition every single game. Number 7. Sammy Sosa. Sosa has 2 distinct scandals attached to his name, and neither one helped his reputation with fans or voters. In 2003, his bat shattered during a game against the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. When it broke apart on contact, everyone in the stadium could see what was hidden inside. Cork? Sosa claimed it was a batting practice bat that he accidentally used in a real game by mistake. Nobody believed that explanation then, and nobody believes it now. The explanation was absolutely ridiculous on its face. Professional hitters at the highest level do not mix up their game bats and practice bats. They know exactly which bat they are grabbing every single time. The feel, the weight, everything is different. The league suspended him for 7 games as punishment, and that should have been the end of the story. But then the second shadow appeared over his career. In 2003, Major League Baseball conducted an anonymous survey test to figure out exactly how widespread steroid use really was across the sport. The results were supposed to stay completely secret and confidential. But in 2009, a major newspaper report leaked that 104 players tested positive in that anonymous survey. Sosa was reportedly one of those 104 names. He was never named in the official Mitchell report that came out in 2007, which gave him some level of plausible deniability. But the combination of the corked bat incident and the survey test implication created a cloud of suspicion that never lifted from his career. Against Maddux head-to-head, Sosa hit just .210 with only 3 home runs in their matchups. Maddux absolutely had his number. The strategy was simple and effective: stay down in the zone. Sosa was extremely dangerous on pitches that were thigh-high and elevated, where he could get his arms extended. He could absolutely crush those pitches into the stands. But if you kept the ball low and away from his power zone, he struggled significantly. Maddux executed that specific specific game plan over and over against Sosa, and it worked consistently. Sosa was one of the most feared power hitters of the late 1990s, but Maddux made him look ordinary and overmatched. That is what happens when pure intelligence meets raw power in a sustained battle. Intelligence wins if it is patient enough and disciplined enough. Sosa never made it to the Hall of Fame despite his impressive career numbers. His vote totals actually dropped in his second year on the ballot instead of rising, which almost never happens. Voters saw the corked bat, the survey test implications, and the documented conflicts with teammates and management. They decided his career was too tainted to honor, and they moved on to other candidates. Number 6. Mark McGwire. In the summer of 1998, Mark McGwire hit 70 home runs and broke Roger Maris' single-season record that had stood for 37 years. The entire nation went absolutely crazy with excitement. Baseball was desperately trying to come back from the 1994 players' strike that canceled the World Series and devastated fan interest. Fans were angry, disillusioned, and many had walked away from the sport completely. Then McGwire and Sammy Sosa started chasing the home run record together, and suddenly everyone was paying attention to baseball again. Stadiums filled up with excited crowds. Television ratings soared to levels not seen in years. It genuinely felt like baseball had been saved from irrelevance. But the entire thing was built on a lie. In 2010, more than a decade later, McGwire finally admitted he used steroids intermittently for over a decade of his playing career. That included the magical 1998 season that supposedly saved baseball. He claimed he used steroids primarily for health reasons and to recover from nagging injuries faster. He acknowledged they also made him significantly stronger at the plate. No kidding. Against Maddux in head-to-head matchups, McGwire hit .316 with a massive 1.172 OPS. That is one of the very few times someone consistently beat Maddux in sustained competition. The steroids gave McGwire the bat speed and muscle mass to turn rare mistake pitches into home runs. Even Maddux's elite pitch sequencing and location could not completely neutralize that kind of artificially boosted power. Maddux would execute his game plan perfectly, staying away and staying down, but one single mistake pitch and McGwire could punish it harder than a natural hitter ever could with normal strength. The fallout from McGwire's confession has been absolutely brutal for his legacy. He has become the poster child for the zero-tolerance voting bloc in Hall of Fame discussions. These voters cite the character clause in the voting instructions, which tells them to consider integrity and sportsmanship alongside statistics. They argue that McGwire's records were not achieved through natural ability alone, so they do not belong in a museum dedicated to celebrating the game's history. The 1998 season is now remembered with cynicism and bitterness instead of joy. What felt like a magical summer is now viewed as a pharmacological experiment disguised as a baseball season. McGwire tried to rehabilitate his public image by becoming a hitting coach, but the damage is permanent. Fans do not forgive easily, and baseball writers have long memories. His confession came too late to matter. By the time he finally admitted it, everyone already knew the truth. The confession was not brave. It was inevitable, and it did not earn him any redemption whatsoever. Number 5. Jose Canseco. Canseco is the only person on this entire list who ruined the game twice, first by cheating himself, then by exposing everyone else who cheated alongside him. In 2005, he published a controversial book called Juiced. In it, he named Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro, and Ivan Rodriguez as fellow steroid users. He described a clubhouse culture where players openly injected each other with banned substances. He claimed that he and McGwire used to inject each other regularly in the Oakland Athletics clubhouse like it was completely normal. At first, people dismissed him as a bitter former player trying to make money off sensational claims. But then the Mitchell report came out in 2007, and it confirmed many of his accusations. Then players started testing positive for banned substances, and Canseco's claims were vindicated. He was right about everything. People just did not want to believe him, because admitting he was right meant admitting the entire era was fraudulent. Canseco argued that steroid use was so widespread that it had become an actual requirement to compete at the highest level. If you wanted to keep up with your peers, you had to use. That created a toxic environment where clean players felt intense pressure to cheat just to survive in the league. Canseco's recall for specific at-bats and game situations was reportedly remarkable, similar to Maddux in terms of memory and raw baseball intelligence. But while Maddux used his brain to play the game correctly and fairly, Canseco used his to beat the system and then later burn it all down. He broke the code of silence that protected the steroid culture for years. Players hated him for it. The league resented him deeply, but he was telling the truth, and history has proven that. Canseco knew the drug culture better than anyone in baseball, baseball, and his willingness to expose it made him a complete pariah. But it also made the Mitchell Report possible. Without Canseco breaking the silence first, the investigation might never have gained the traction it needed. His legacy is complicated and messy. He cheated, admitted it openly, and then exposed the system that enabled him. He is both part of the problem and part of the solution, and baseball still has not figured out what to do with that contradictory reality. Number 4. Rafael Palmeiro. In March 2005, Rafael Palmeiro sat in front of the United States Congress during hearings on steroid use in baseball. He wagged his finger directly at the members of Congress and said emphatically, "I have never used steroids." It was emphatic. It was confident. It was a complete lie. Less than 5 months later, Palmeiro tested positive for stanozolol, an anabolic steroid. He became the first high-profile player suspended under the league's new, stricter testing policy. The optics were absolutely devastating. He had just lied to Congress on national television, and then he immediately got caught. It looked like perjury. It destroyed his reputation instantly. Palmeiro was part of the extremely rare 3,000 hits and 500 home runs club. Only a handful of players in baseball history have reached both milestones. That achievement alone should have guaranteed first ballot Hall of Fame induction. Instead, his vote totals have been embarrassingly low year after year. The positive test and the finger wag moment created a narrative of dishonesty that voters simply cannot ignore. Palmeiro later claimed that the banned substance came from a B12 injection given to him by a teammate. He called it a mistake and a lack of due diligence on his part, but the explanation felt weak and implausible. Professional athletes at that level know exactly what they are putting in their bodies. They have teams of trainers and doctors monitoring everything. The idea that he accidentally took a banned substance by accident just does not hold up under scrutiny. Maddox, by contrast, was elected to the Hall of Fame with 97.2% of the vote. His numbers were built on natural talent and relentless study. No shortcuts, no excuses, no asterisks. The gap between Maddox's career and Palmeiro's career is not just statistical, it is fundamentally moral. Maddox's legacy is completely secure. Palmeiro's is permanently tarnished, and the difference came down to one choice: stay clean or cheat. Maddox stayed clean. Palmeiro did not, and that single choice defined how history remembers them. Number 3. Roger Clemens. If Barry Bonds was the face of offensive steroid use, Roger Clemens was his pitching counterpart. In 2007, the Mitchell Report named him 82 times. The report, spearheaded by Senator George Mitchell, relied heavily on testimony from Brian McNamee, Clemens's former strength coach. McNamee claimed he personally injected the pitcher with steroids and human growth hormone on multiple occasions. Clemens denied everything aggressively. He said the injections were merely vitamin B12 and lidocaine for pain management. In 2008, he testified before Congress and maintained his innocence under oath. He was later acquitted of perjury charges in a court of law, but the court of public opinion and the Hall of Fame voters have been far less forgiving. Clemens's career longevity is the most suspicious part of his entire story. He pitched at an elite level well into his 40s. At age 45, he rejoined the Yankees mid-season and was still throwing hard and dominating hitters. That kind of sustained performance defies normal human aging. Most pitchers experience steep declines in their late 30s. Clemens seemed to get better. His career wins above replacement reached 138.7, a massive number that many believe was inflated by his ability to avoid natural decline through chemical enhancement. Compare that to Maddox, whose career WR was 106.6, but whose peak era share was 41.1, higher than Clemens. Maddox dominated during the heart of the steroid era without any artificial help. Clemens maintained dominance longer than biology should have allowed. That difference matters. Maddox aged like a normal pitcher. His velocity dropped, his body slowed down, and he adjusted his approach to compensate. He stayed effective by getting smarter, not by staying unnaturally strong. Clemens, on the other hand, seemed to defy aging entirely. He was still throwing mid-90s heat in his mid-40s. The Mitchell Report suggested that human growth hormone allowed older players to recover faster and maintain peak performance levels far beyond what was naturally possible, and Clemens became the symbol of that. He is still not in the Hall of Fame. Despite the acquittal, despite the denials, voters remain deeply skeptical. The shadow of the Mitchell Report and McNamee's testimony is too large to overcome. And the fact that Clemens aggressively denied everything instead of admitting fault probably made it worse. Fans and writers might have forgiven a confession. They are less likely to forgive what looks like perjury. Number 2. Alex Rodriguez. Alex Rodriguez represents the second wave of the steroid crisis. While the Mitchell Report focused primarily on the late 1990s and early 2000s, the biogenesis scandal in 2013 proved that elite players were still finding sophisticated ways to cheat. Rodriguez was at the absolute center of it. The investigation revealed that he was a regular client client of a Florida clinic run by Tony Bosch. The clinic allegedly provided human growth hormone and other performance enhancers to professional athletes. Rodriguez received a massive 211-game suspension, later reduced to 162 games. That remains the longest non-lifetime ban in Major League Baseball history. The biogenesis case highlighted a critical flaw in the testing system. The investigation did not rely on traditional drug tests. It was based on documents, financial records, and testimony. This is called a non-analytical positive. It means players could still cheat as long as they used substances sophisticated enough to evade urine and blood tests. Rodriguez had already admitted to using steroids from 2001 to 2003 during his time with the Texas Rangers, but the biogenesis scandal showed he had not stopped. He kept looking for edges even after the league supposedly cracked down. His career stats are impressive: 696 home runs, 3 MVP awards, and more than 10 wins above replacement in multiple seasons. But those achievements are now viewed through the lens of suspicion. How much of that was natural talent, and how much was chemical enhancement? Nobody knows for sure, and that uncertainty is the problem. Rodriguez's contract with the Rangers, a 10-year, $252 million deal signed in 2000, remains one of the biggest financial markers of the era. He was a superstar, a rock star level athlete, and then he became one of the biggest tainters in the game. The controversy surrounding his later transition into a media personality continues. Despite being a central figure in one of baseball's biggest scandals, he now works as a commentator and analyst. Some fans see that as a redemption arc, others see it as tone deaf. The debate reflects the broader question of what to do with players who cheated but are still part of the game's ecosystem. Rodriguez is out there talking about baseball on television, while players like Pete Rose, who bet on games but never used steroids, are banned for life. The inconsistency frustrates fans and muddies the conversation about what integrity really means. Number 1. Barry Bonds. This is where it all comes together. Barry Bonds is the most complex and controversial figure in baseball history. Before Balco, he was already a surefire Hall of Famer. He had power, speed, and plate discipline that made him one of the best players of his generation. But in the late 1990s, something changed dramatically. Many people believe Bonds watched Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa get all the attention during the 1998 home run chase and decided he wanted that spotlight too. So he sought out an edge. That edge came from Balco, the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative. The lab distributed the cream and the clear, substances designed specifically to evade standard drug testing. The investigation into Balco eventually led to Bonds being indicted for perjury and obstruction of justice related to his testimony about steroid use. The numbers are absolutely staggering. Bonds hit 73 home runs in 2001, breaking McGwire's single-season record. He finished his career with 762 home runs, surpassing Hank Aaron's all-time mark. But here's the important context. Bonds and Aaron both played 22 seasons. In all that time, Bonds only managed to hit 7 more home runs than Aaron. That suggests the steroids did not make Bonds a better player than Aaron. They just extended his peak artificially and allowed him to stay elite longer than natural aging would have permitted. The chess match between Maddux and Bonds has become legendary. In their head-to-head matchups, Maddux held Bonds to a .243 batting average. In 74 plate appearances, Maddux walked him 17 times, allowed 5 home runs, and struck him out 11 times. The strategy was clear: stay away, stay down, and minimize damage. Do not give Bonds anything in the middle of the plate where his power could take over. Bonds was looking for a specific pitch in a specific zone. He would wait all day for Maddux to make a rare mistake. Maddux knew that, so he pitched around him constantly. Interestingly, Maddux once said he found Jeff Kent to be a tougher out than Bonds. Kent's approach was less predictable. Bonds had become so focused on power in his later years that his strategy was more readable. That is the irony. The steroids made Bonds physically stronger, but they may have also made him mentally more one-dimensional. The psychological aspect of their matchups reveals how both players thought. They used the same language to describe their goals. Maddux wanted to stay away and stay down. Bonds wanted to wait for a mistake and crush it. Both understood the game within the game, but Maddux was doing it with his natural brain and natural body. Bonds was doing it with chemical assistance. That is the core difference. Maddux's greatness is unquestioned because it was earned. Bonds' greatness will always have an asterisk because nobody knows how much of it was real and how much was manufactured. Bonds is still not in the Hall of Fame. Despite being one of the most dominant players ever, despite breaking the most famous record in sports, voters have kept him out. The character clause gives them cover. The argument is that the Hall of Fame is supposed to honor players who exemplified integrity and sportsmanship, not just raw performance. Bonds failed that test. Some voters argue he was naturally great and would have been a Hall of Famer even without steroids. That is probably true, but the problem is we will never know for sure where natural Bonds ended and enhanced Bonds began. That uncertainty is his legacy, and it is a tragedy, because if he had stayed clean, his career would have been celebrated without reservation. Instead, it is debated, questioned, and doubted. The institutional failure runs deeper than individual players. Commissioner Bud Selig presided over the entire steroid era. Under his leadership, the league saw massive financial growth. driven largely by the home run explosion. Critics argue that Selig knowingly looked the other way because the increased offense was extremely good for business. After the 1994 strike devastated fan interest and led to the cancellation of the World Series, the league was desperate for a resurgence in popularity. The McGwire and Sosa chase in 1998 provided exactly that. Suddenly, stadiums were full again. Television ratings were up. Revenue was pouring in. So the league had a clear financial incentive to ignore the obvious signs of steroid use. Players were getting bigger, faster, stronger in ways that defied biology. And nobody in leadership did anything about it until the scandal became too big to ignore. This created an environment of normalized deviance. When the rules are not enforced, breaking them becomes normal. Players felt pressure to cheat just to keep up with their competitors. Clean players were penalized for staying clean. That is institutional failure at the highest level. The league created the problem by refusing to address it until it exploded publicly. Selig was eventually inducted into the Hall of Fame himself, which many voters find hypocritical. The players who fueled his success and his revenue growth are being barred from the Hall for the exact same actions that he enabled by looking the other way. The inconsistency is glaring. Either everyone involved in the steroid era shares blame, or nobody does. Right now, the punishment is falling almost entirely on the players, while the executives who profited walk away clean. The Hall of Fame voting process has become the battleground where this debate plays out. The character clause instructs voters to consider integrity, sportsmanship, and character. That vague language has allowed 4 distinct voting blocks to form. The zero-tolerance voters believe any link to steroids, whether a positive test or even just suspicion, is enough to bar a player for life. The evidence-based voters are willing to vote for players with whispers of use but will exclude those with definitive proof, like indictments or positive tests. The elite exception bloc believes players like Bonds and Clemens were so naturally talented that they would have been Hall of Famers without steroids, so they deserve induction despite their transgressions. The performance-only voters argue the Hall of Fame is a historical museum and should record what happened on the field regardless of how it was achieved. These 4 groups cannot agree, and that deadlock has kept some of the era's biggest names out of Cooperstown. The result is a Hall of Fame that increasingly does not reflect the reality of the game's history. The steroid era happened. Pretending it did not by excluding everyone involved does not change that, but rewarding cheaters by enshrining them does not feel right either. So the debate continues, year after year, with no resolution in sight. But here's what matters most. Greg Maddux did not expose these cheaters by yelling about them. He did not write tell-all books or give inflammatory interviews. He exposed them by proving that clean excellence still worked. While others were chemically redesigning their bodies, Maddux was studying hitters and refining his craft. While others were looking for shortcuts, Maddux was putting in the work. And at the end of 23 seasons, he had 355 wins, 4 Cy Young Awards, 18 Gold Gloves, and a 3.16 ERA achieved during the highest scoring era in baseball history. He did it with an 87-mile-per-hour fastball and a brain that processed information faster than anyone else on the field. That is the legacy that lasts. Bonds, McGwire, Clemens, Rodriguez, Palmeiro, Canseco, Sosa, and the Astros all have their records in the books. But those records come with mental asterisks that fans and historians will never remove. The public attaches doubt to their achievements. Was it real or was it manufactured? Did they earn it or did they steal it? Those questions do not get asked about Maddux. His greatness is unquestioned because it was built on legitimate skill and relentless intelligence. The lesson is clear. Legitimacy matters more than pure output. Cheating might give you a temporary peak, but it destroys your legacy permanently. Maddux proved that the right way still works. You can still dominate without artificial help. You can still win without bending the rules. And when your career is over, you can stand in Cooperstown with your head held high, knowing that everything you achieved was real. The cheaters do not get that peace. They have to live with the knowledge that their accomplishments will always be questioned. They traded long-term respect for short-term success, and the trade was a terrible deal. Baseball has moved into a new era now. Advanced data and wearable technology are changing how the game is played, but the lessons of the steroid and sign-stealing eras remain relevant. The value of the game is not in the height of the home run or the speed of the pitch. It is in the legitimacy of the contest. When that legitimacy is compromised, the entire sport suffers. Fans stop trusting what they see. Records lose meaning. History gets rewritten with doubt and suspicion. Greg Maddux, standing as the clean benchmark, provides the perspective needed to understand that truth. Cheating may provide a temporary advantage, but mastery of the craft ensures lasting immortality. The ongoing Hall of Fame debate ensures that Bonds, Clemens, and the others will remain at the forefront of baseball discourse for decades. They will serve as permanent reminders of the fragile balance between innovation and integrity. Whether through chemical means or technological espionage, their attempts to ruin the game only highlighted the brilliance of those who played it the right way. Maddux Maddox did not need to cheat to be great. He just needed to be smarter than everyone else. And he was. That is how you expose cheaters. Not by calling them out, but by making them irrelevant through your own excellence. So if you appreciate what Maddox represents, hit that like button, subscribe to Baseball Icons, and drop a comment about which players' fall from grace hit you the hardest. Because this conversation is not over. As long as the Hall of Fame keeps debating these names, we will keep talking about what integrity means and why it matters. Maddox gave us the answer. Now it is up to the rest of baseball to listen.
He was at some point, right? Yeah. He used to throw a spitball, and the way the spitball ball was done, it's hard to show the people who are listening, but most pitches are thrown with the seams or across the seams. Sure, in the day, some of our older guests might remember Gaylord Perry, Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
He was known for cheating all the time.
He's a fucking cheater. That is the kind of label that can follow a baseball legend forever. Baseball has always loved its heroes. But baseball also has a long memory. A player can hit home runs, win titles, become famous, and still have one word chase him forever: cheater. Karl Ravech has spent decades around the biggest MLB debates on ESPN. His coverage shows that cheating in baseball is not simple. Some players used chemicals, some teams used technology, some broke gambling rules, some bent the ball itself, and some were never punished the way fans wanted. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. And if this story already has you thinking about how much trust baseball lost, give this video some hype so more fans can join the debate. Today we are going through 6 names, 6 legends, 6 stories of greatness that got tangled up with something darker. We are going in reverse order. Number 6, number 5, number 4, number 3, number 2, and then the biggest name of all. These are the players and teams that Karl Ravech and ESPN had to face head-on. Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, Pete Rose, the Houston Astros, Gaylord Perry, and Mark McGwire. This video is not about pretending they were not great. It is about asking what their greatness is worth after trust is broken. Before we get into the names, we have to talk about why Karl Ravech matters here at all. Ravech is not just some random voice. He has been one of ESPN's key baseball faces since 1993. He anchored Baseball Tonight. He called Sunday Night Baseball for decades. When baseball had a problem, when a scandal broke, when a legend's name was being dragged through the mud, Ravech was the one sitting at the desk and asking the tough question. He was the face on the screen. Fans needed someone to make sense of mess. But here is the thing the research makes very clear. Ravech did not work alone. He was not a judge sitting by himself and handing down rules. His broadcasts were an arena. Journalists, former players, league executives, fans at home, they all came into that arena together. The word cheater is powerful because it can shrink a whole career into one label, and that label was not always handed out fairly or consistently. Some players got it hard and fast. Others slipped through without much damage. That inconsistency is a big part of the story we are telling today. What ESPN's coverage showed over and over is that cheating in baseball is not one thing. It is many, and the way fans and media react to different types of cheating is not always logical. That gap between how we treat one kind of rule breaker versus another is where the real arguments live. And Ravech's shows became the place where those arguments happened on a national level. The word cheater, when it gets attached to a great player, does not just change how we see that. It changes how we see the whole era they played in. It makes fans question everything, and that is exactly why these 6 names still start arguments today. Think about what it means for a broadcast journalist to sit across from a player or a commissioner and ask the hard question in front of millions of people. It is not easy. There is pressure from the league. There is pressure from the network. There is pressure from teams and agents and public relations people who would prefer softer questions. Ravech did it anyway. He pressed Rob Manfred on the buzzer allegations. He sat through awkward press conferences. He framed players like Barry Bonds not as simple villains, but as complicated figures in a complicated story. That kind of journalism shapes how fans remember history. Not every broadcaster is willing to hold the uncomfortable tension between a player's greatness and their scandal. Ravech held it. And that is what makes his role in these stories worth understanding before we get into the names themselves. So let us get into it, starting with number 6. Number 6, Mark McGwire. Think back to the summer of 1998. Baseball was struggling. The sport had lost fans after a player strike. Then something happened that changed everything. Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa started chasing one of the most famous records in all of sports, the single-season home run record. Fans came back to ballparks. People who had never cared about baseball started watching. Sports bars were full. Parents brought their kids to see something historic. It felt like the sport had saved. McGwire was right at the center of it all. He was tall, powerful. He hit baseballs in ways that looked almost impossible. When he finally broke the record, stadiums went crazy. The country went crazy. It felt like a moment that baseball would celebrate forever. But here is the problem. McGwire later admitted that he used steroids during that home run boom of the late 1990s. He said it himself. He did not wait to be caught. He did not fight the allegations for years. He admitted it. And that admission did not just change how people saw him, it changed how people saw 1998. It changed how people saw the whole era. All those home runs, all those record-breaking nights, all those moments that brought fans back to the game. Fans had to go back through every memory and ask a simple question: was any of this real? That is the damage Mark McGwire did, not just to his own legacy, but to an entire chapter of baseball history. The home run boom of the late 1990s was supposed to be a comeback story for the sport. It was supposed to prove that baseball was bigger than its problem. But after the truth came out, that comeback story had a asterisk hanging over it. Fans were left to figure out what the era was really worth. Research talks about how ESPN's coverage framed the PED era as a systemic problem. It was not just one player. Thousands of players were part of a culture that looked the other way when it came to performance-enhancing drugs. League officials knew, media members knew, and yet for years, nobody blew the whistle loudly enough to stop it. McGwire became the face of the admission. He said the words. He took the responsibility. But the culture that let it happen was much bigger than one big first baseman. Some fans gave McGwire credit for admitting it. They said at least he was honest. Others said honesty after the fact is not the same as never doing it in the first place. His Hall of Fame numbers never got him Cooperstown. Voters looked at those home run totals and saw something tainted. And the sad truth is that a player who had been one of the most celebrated athletes in America became a permanent symbol of the sport's broken trust. He had the chance to be remembered as a hero. He is remembered as something more complicated than that. His numbers were real. His physical ability. But fans who lived through 1998 know that the joy of that summer never felt quite the same after the truth came out. And that is the kind of damage that no apology fully fixes. Consider also what McGwire's situation says about the people in power at the time. The league was watching those home run numbers go up. Television ratings were climbing. Attendance was recovering. Nobody in a position of authority decided to stop and ask how it was all happening. The system benefited from the performance. And then when the truth came out, the system stepped back and let one player become the face of the problem. McGwire admitted his part, but the front offices and networks and the owners who watched the revenue climb during that era never had to hold a press conference and explain themselves. That double standard is part of why fans are right to stay angry about the whole thing. McGwire was number 6 on our, but the kind of doubt he helped spread, that touched every name that followed. Number 5, Houston Astros. If Mark McGwire showed what one player's choices could do to baseball's trust, the Houston Astros showed what happens when an entire team cheats together. This was not one player making a private decision in a locker room. This was a system, a planned, organized, technology-driven system that turned the game into something it was never supposed to be. Here is how it started. The Astros began developing an electronic sign decoding program during the 2016 season. Front office intern named Derek Vigoa put together a presentation with the team's general manager about a program called Codebreaker. Internally, they called it the team's dark arts. That name alone should tell you everything you need to know about what they thought they were doing. They knew it was wrong, they called it dark, and they kept going anyway. By early 2017, the veteran Carlos Beltran told the organization that their sign decoding methods were not advanced enough. Beltran and bench coach Alex Cora pushed a cultural shift that turned this system from a quiet background operation into something players used in real time. The method they landed on was simple, loud, and impossible to miss in hindsight. A trash can in the dugout. Bangers hitting the can to signal batters about what pitch was coming. 1 bang. 2 bangs. No bang. The batter knew what to expect before the pitch was thrown. Front office emails from that time referred to Beltran as the godfather of the scheme. That word says a lot. Not a participant, not a helper. The godfather. When the commissioner's report came out in 2020, Beltran was the only active player named direct. He had already been hired to manage the New York Mets, but he parted ways with the team before he ever managed a single game. His career ended not because of what he did on the field, but because of what he helped build in that dugout. The player who took the most public heat was Jose Altuve. He was the face of that 2017 Astros team. He was the AL most valuable player that year, and when the scandal broke, fans turned on him hard. Cody Bellinger, an outfielder for the Los Angeles Dodgers, said publicly that Altuve stole the World Series ring from the Dodgers and the MVP award from Aaron Judge. Those words cut deep because a lot of fans believe. But here is where the data makes things more complicated. An Astros fan named Tony Adams built a public database by going through 58 home games from 2017 season. He tracked 8,274 pitches and documented 1,143 trash can bang. What he found was that player participation in the system was not equal. A utility player named Marwin Gonzalez had signals on about 18% of pitches he saw. Altuve had the lowest frequency among everyday starters. That does not clear the Astros as a team, but it shows that blaming one star player as the main villain was too simple. Then came the buzzer rumors. During the 2019 season, people started wondering if Astros players were wearing small electronic buzzers under their jerseys to receive signals during at-bats. The suspicion got loud after Altuve hit a walk-off home run in Game 6 of the 2019 American League Championship Series Series and immediately pleaded with teammates not to rip off his jersey to celebrate. That moment, caught on camera, became one of the most talked about moments in recent baseball history. Karl Ravech sat down with Commissioner Rob Manfred in February 2020. He pressed Manfred directly on the buzzer investigation. Manfred admitted that the league could not prove buzzer use with 100% certainty. He said no witnesses backed up the allegation. That answer did not satisfy fans. It felt like another door being shut before the full truth could come out. And then came the line that may have done more damage to baseball's leadership than any single moment in recent memory. Ravech asked Manfred about stripping the Astros of their 2017 World Series title. Manfred said, demanding the return of the trophy was futile because it was merely a piece of metal. A piece of metal. That is what the commissioner called a World Series trophy. To fans who had spent years watching teams chase that trophy, who had seen players sacrifice their bodies for a chance to hold it, that phrase felt like an insult. It felt like the person running baseball did not understand what baseball meant to the people who loved it. The active players were given full immunity in exchange for their honest testimony during the investigation. Manfred explained to Ravech that the league's warning about electronic sign stealing in 2017 had been sent to general managers but never properly passed down to players. That meant any attempt to suspend players would have been challenged by the players' union and the league would have lost, so the players walked. The managers lost their jobs. The front office paid fines. But the players who actually stood at the plate and benefited from knowing what pitch was coming, they played on. That decision sent pitchers across baseball into a quiet raid. Some threatened publicly to hit Astros batters. 2020 season started. Manfred had to send a memo to all managers warning that any intentional hit by pitch brings serious suspension. Think about that sequence. The league could not punish the players who cheated, but the league could and did threaten punishment for players who wanted justice. The system broke down, and the cleanup made it look easy. The Astros scandal was different from anything that came before. PED use was about individual players making private choices to change their body. Sign stealing with technology was a team operation. Front office. It moved the integrity crisis from personal chemistry to corporate strategy, and the league's response left fans feeling like the cheating was managed rather than punished. That is a feeling that does not go away easily. Number 4. Gaylord Perry. After everything we just talked about, it might seem strange to include a pitcher who played decades ago, but Gaylord Perry belongs on this list because his story shows something important about how baseball decides what kind of cheating it is willing to laugh about. Perry spent his career building a legendary reputation for doctoring baseballs, spitball, hidden substances, Vaseline, whatever he could find. He was not subtle about it. He practically performed the act of searching his body for the hidden substance as a routine before every pitch. It became theater. Hitters knew what he was doing. Umpires suspected, and yet Perry kept doing it for years across multiple teams and multiple decades. He even wrote a book about it. The book was called Me and the Spitter. He put the evidence of his cheating in the title of his own memoir. Here is the thing about Perry's cheating. Fans mostly thought it was funny. People talked about it like it was clever, like he had figured out a trick and deserved credit for pulling it off so long. When he was eventually inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, the talk around his cheating was almost warm. It was framed as part of his personality, part of his legend. The research document raises an important point about this. ESPN's Hall of Fame debates included the idea that ball players had been cheating for 150 years, scuffing baseballs, corking bats, finding every possible edge and using it until someone caught them. These were treated as gamesmanship, as part of the culture of the sport. The line between being clever and being a cheater was soft and flexible, depending on what era you played in and how charming you were when people found out. So why does Perry get treated as a lovable rogue while others in this video are treated as villains? That is the question his story forces us to ask. The honest answer is that the rules he broke were considered old-fashioned rule bend, the stuff of folk. Nobody thought doctoring a baseball was going to destroy the sport. It was one pitcher, one ball, one game at a time. But strip away the charm and ask the simple question, did Gaylord Perry gain an unfair competitive advantage over hitters by putting foreign substances on a baseball? Yes, he did. He said so himself, and he did it for so long across so many games that it became a defining feature of his career. He is in the Hall of Fame partly because of what those doctored pitches helped him accomplish. Baseball has never been fully consistent about where it draws the line, and Perry is the clearest example of the sport winking at one kind of cheating while hammering players for another. The scale of what Perry did was smaller than a team-wide technology scandal, but the lesson his career teaches is that baseball's moral logic has always been flexible when it suited the sport's interests. That flexibility did not disappear. It just got applied differently depending on the era. Here is the uncomfortable truth Perry's career forces us to sit with. If a player today was caught doctoring baseballs every single game for 2 decades and then wrote a book bragging about it, that player would face suspension. The rules have not changed. The action has not changed, but the cultural framing around it has changed completely. What once got you a wink and a Hall of Fame plaque now gets you a different kind of headline. The game draws lines in different places depending on the moment, and that inconsistency is something baseball has never fully answered. Perry benefited from playing in an era that smiled at what he did. Players on this list before him paid in an era that did not. Same game. Very different rules about which rules matter. Number 3. Pete Rose. There is a word baseball has always been more afraid of than any other. Not steroids, not sign stealing. Gambling. The sport has treated gambling as a third rail since 1919, when the Black Sox scandal nearly destroyed public faith in the game entirely. The idea that a player or team could be betting on outcomes, that the results on the field might be shaped by something other than the pursuit of winning, is the deepest possible threat to what makes baseball worth watching. Pete Rose knew this. Every player knows that. The rule is posted in every major league clubhouse. It is not a secret, and Rose broke it anyway. Investigations concluded that Rose gambled on baseball games while he was a manager, including games involving his own team. The punishment was a lifetime ban from the sport. He has been on the permanently ineligible list ever since, and that ban has kept him out of the Baseball Hall of Fame, which means one of the most famous players in the history of the sport cannot be honored in the sport's own museum. No one serious argues that Pete Rose was not one of baseball's great players. His career hit total is the all-time record. He played with a relentless energy that earned him the nickname Charlie Hustle. Fans loved watching him. He was the kind of player who made you feel like baseball mattered. And then the investigations came, and the evidence was clear, and the commissioner at the time made the call. Lifetime ban. Gone from the sport's official family. For a long time, the argument about Rose was pretty simple. He knew the rule, he broke the rule. The punishment matched the crime. But then something changed. Not in baseball's rules, but in the world around baseball. Sports gambling went from being something leagues pretended did not exist to being something leagues actively partnered with. Sportsbook commercials now run during broadcasts. Teams have official gambling partners. The league itself has relationships with betting companies. Baseball, which banned Pete Rose for gambling on baseball, now profits from the gambling industry's involvement with baseball. This shift has made the Rose debate much harder to settle. The research notes that Karl Ravech expressed concern about a 2025 decision to allow a committee to review Pete Rose's lifetime ban. Ravech called it a possible Pandora's box situation. That phrase says a lot. Once you start reviewing lifetime bans in the context of a sport that has changed its relationship with gambling, you are opening a question that does not have a clean answer. If baseball can profit from sports betting, how does it keep arguing that betting on baseball is the worst possible sin a person connected to the game commit? But here is the negative angle that has to stay clear. Whatever the sport does now with gambling money, and whatever committees decide about reviewing old bans, does not change what Pete Rose actually did. He gambled on games. His decisions may have created the possibility that results were influenced by his personal financial interests. That is not a small thing. That is not a charm issue like Gaylord Perry doctoring a baseball. Gambling can make fans wonder if the game itself was ever playing out honestly. When you gamble on games you manage, you put a question mark over every decision you make. Every lineup, every pitching change, every strategy. Did you make that choice to win the game, protect a bet? Rose's greatness as a player does not remove that question mark of his time as a manager, and the fact that baseball has shifted its stance on the gambling industry does not mean the lifetime ban was wrong when it was given. It means baseball has its own hypocrisy to answer for. Both things can be true at the same time. Pete Rose broke a rule that existed for very good reasons, and the sport that punished him is now in complicated territory when it comes to gambling. Neither side of that equation makes the other one disappear. There is also something worth saying about the difference between the cheating cases earlier on this list and what Rose did. McGuire and Rodriguez used PEDs to change what their bodies could do. The Astros used technology to know what pitch was coming. Those are violations of the rules, and they damage trust in the game. But their motivation was to win game. Rose's situation is harder to defend because the motivation for gambling on games where you have inside knowledge is different. It raises the question of whether a manager with bets on the line is making every decision to help the team win or making decisions that protect his financial position. That question does not have a clean answer, and the fact that it cannot be answered cleanly is exactly why the lifetime ban existed in the first place. Baseball decided that question could never be allowed to exist inside the dugout. Rose made it exist anyway. Number 2, Alex Rodriguez. Some cheaters are easy to feel sorry for, some are not. Alex Rodriguez falls into the second category for a lot of fans. Not because he was the worst offender, but because he had everything. Real talent, real fame, enormous contract, a massive public spotlight. He did not need to cheat. That is what makes the cheating feel so ugly. A-Rod admitted using performance-enhancing drugs during his time with the Texas Rangers. He said it. He owned it. That was one level of accountability. But the story did not end there. Years later, later came the Biogenesis scandal. Biogenesis was a Florida clinic connected to the distribution of performance-enhancing drugs. The investigation led back to Rodriguez, and this time, the league did not just talk about it. He was suspended for 162 games, which was the entire 2014 season. That suspension was historic. It was the longest non-lifetime drug-related suspension in baseball history at that. Unlike Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, who avoided positive drug tests during their active careers, A-Rod had direct documented involvement with the Biogenesis operation. He fought the suspension hard. He appealed it. He made it into a long, public, ugly process. And ultimately, the suspension held. He missed the entire season. His Hall of Fame case was damaged beyond repair. The research talks about how Espen framed Rodriguez as someone who made a calculated trade-off. He chose enhanced performance over historical reputation. He chose the financial rewards of peak performance over the clean legacy he built. Some athletes, the analysis noted, deliberately sacrificed Hall of Fame standing to secure massive contracts through the advantage PEs provided. Whether that was Rodriguez's exact thinking or not, it is how his choices looked to the outside world. But here is where the story gets more complicated. Even after the suspension, even after all the investigations, even after being shut out of Cooperstown, Espen hired Rodriguez. They paired him with broadcaster Michael Kay and put him on the K-Rod cast, their alternative broadcast that ran alongside Sunday Night Baseball. The show was aimed at casual fans. It was relaxed and entertaining and built around making baseball accessible to people who did not watch it closely. And Alex Rodriguez, who had been suspended for cheating, was one of the two main faces of it. This is the media paradox that the research identifies very clearly. Espen used its broadcasts to debate Hall of Fame exclusions and moral standards in baseball. It talked about what cheating meant and what it cost the sport. And then it hired one of the most famous cheaters in recent history and gave him a prime-time platform. The network condemned the behavior and then used the star power attached to that behavior to boost ratings. The two things happened at the same time. They still happen at the same time. And fans noticed. That does not mean Rodriguez was wrong to take the job. It does not mean Espen was wrong to offer it. People rebuild careers. People move forward. But it does show how complicated the word cheater really is in professional sports. The league suspended him for a full season. The Hall of Fame shut him out. The media debated his legacy for years. And then television found a way to use that very controversy to make a more interesting broadcast. The system says one thing and does another, and Rodriguez is the clearest example of that gap in recent memory. His talent was real. Nobody who watched him play at his peak would argue that he was not one of the most gifted players of his generation. But fans who wanted one clear face for the scandal did not have to look very hard. He admitted it. He fought the suspension and lost. He made the whole thing feel calculated and cold, and he ended up as the most convenient symbol of a generation that chose chemistry over honesty when it mattered most. Number 1. Barry Bonds. And here we are, the biggest name on the list. The one name that, more than any other, became the face of baseball's broken era. Barry Bonds. Let us start by saying something clearly. Barry Bonds was not some average player who used performance-enhancing drugs to sneak into the record books. He was already one of the most complete baseball players the sport had ever seen. Before the years when the suspicion grew loudest, he was already a 4-time MVP. He already had the kind of combination of hitting ability, power, speed, and defensive skill that coaches spend whole careers trying to build in a player. He was, by almost any measure, one of the 2 or 3 best hitters who ever lived. That is not sentiment. That is the honest assessment of people who spent careers watching and studying the game. That makes what happened worse, not better. Because the question that haunts his entire legacy is the one that has no comfortable answer. If he was already that great, why did he need any help at all? The Balco investigations connected Bonds to performance-enhancing drugs. Balco was a sports nutrition company that became the center of one of the biggest PED scandals in American sports history. Bonds was linked to the operation. His home run records, including the all-time career home run record, became impossible to celebrate cleanly after those connections became public. Fans were forced to choose between two things at the same time: awe at what he could do and doubt about how he did it. The Baseball Writers Association of America kept Bonds off the Hall of Fame ballot through years of voting. He was eligible. His numbers, even if you discounted the most suspicious years, were Hall of Fame numbers. But voters could not separate the player from the suspicion. Karl Ravech expressed clear ambivalence about this. The research shows that he pointed out the contradiction in leaving one of the best 2 or 3 hitters of all time out of a museum designed to chronicle the sport's entire history. If the Hall of Fame is supposed to be a record of what happened in baseball, how do you tell the story of the late 1990s and early thousands without Bonds? But the moralist faction pushed back hard. Hall of Famer Barry Larkin was among those who argued that the 2013 Hall of Fame ballot shutout, when no one was elected to Cooperstown, set a necessary precedent. If voters believed a player cheated, they would not support the induction, period. The museum was for the game's greatest. Cheating disqualified you. regardless of numbers. Buster Olney, the ESPN reporter, argued against what he called retroactive morality. His point was that the entire culture of that era, the league officials, the media members, the fans, thousands of players, they all knew what was happening and tolerated it for 2 decades. Punishing players after the fact for something the whole system allowed was not justice. It was selective punishment applied to the biggest targets. Tim Kurkjian echoed that thinking. He said that players had been finding edges for 150 years. Steroids were another chapter in that long history. Putting asterisks next to names and cutting players from the hall was oversimplifying something deeply complex. And yet, the asterisk feeling does not go away. That is the problem with Bonds more than almost anyone else on this list. Because he was so good, because the records he holds are so enormous, the shadow over them is enormous too. The all-time home run record is supposed to be the most celebrated individual achievement in the sport. When it belongs to someone permanently connected to PED suspicion, the whole record feels like it is holding its breath. Fans do not know whether to celebrate it or mourn it. The research points out that Hall of Fame voters argued for years about what the right answer was. Some said include everyone and let history judge. Some said keep out anyone linked to PEDs. Some said the standards were applied differently to players based on personal relationships media, making the whole process uneven. None of those arguments ever produced a clean resolution. Bonds aged out of his eligibility window without ever getting the call to Cooperstown. The most productive hitter of his generation will not be in the Hall of Fame. And the most decorated individual achievement in the sport's history will belong forever to a man surrounded by permanent doubt. That is the core of the Bonds legacy, not just what he did or did not do, but what his case forced baseball to admit about itself. It forced the sport to acknowledge that it had looked the other way for decades. It forced Hall of Fame voters to make choices that could not be made no matter which way they went. It forced fans to decide what they were willing to celebrate and what they needed to question. And it turned the greatest offensive player of his era into the permanent symbol of an era the sport is still trying to explain. So when people debate Barry Bonds, they are not just arguing about one man's choices. They are arguing about the whole machine that surrounded those choices. The culture, the league, the media, the testing policies that came too late, fans who cheered and then wanted someone to blame. Bonds stood at the center of all of it. And no matter how that debate eventually resolves itself, the doubt never fully goes away. And that is the thing about all 6 of these names. Mark McGwire, the Houston Astros, Gaylord Perry, Pete Rose, Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds. They did not just create highlights. They created doubt. And doubt is the one stain that never fully washes out. Baseball is still great because fans care enough to argue. The arguments about these players and this team burn so hot because the sport matters to people. The records matter. The rings matter. The Hall of Fame matters. The truth matters. Fans who fight about these names are not tired of baseball. They are invested in it. They want it to be clean. They want the moments on the field to mean exactly what they look like they mean. That is love for the game, even when it comes out sounding like anger. But the bias has to stay honest. These legends and this team did not just have complicated careers. They damaged something real. Bonds and McGwire and Rodriguez damaged the PED era so badly that fans still cannot watch home run numbers from that time without a quiet question in the back of their minds. The Astros damaged the technology era so badly that winning teams still deal with sign-stealing suspicion when they get hot. Rose damaged the idea of competitive purity in the manager's box. Perry showed that baseball was never fully consistent about where it drew its lines. These are real costs, paid by the fans who trusted the game. But baseball survives scandal when it chooses to tell the truth, protect its rules, and stop treating greatness like a free pass. The sport has been through worse. It has come back from worse. It will keep coming back. Because the game itself, the ball, the diamond, crack of the bat on a summer night, is bigger than any one person who ever played it or cheated in it. What the research behind this video makes clear is that the media's role in all of this is not a small one. When Karl Ravech sits across from a commissioner and presses him on a buzzer investigation, that matters. When ESPN's Baseball Tonight becomes the forum where Hall of Fame morality is argued in front of millions of people, that shapes what fans believe and remember. The broadcasts do not just report the scandal. They help decide how long the scandal echoes. They help decide whether a player gets a complicated legacy or a simple one. And the conversations that happened on those shows over 3 decades helped create the version of these 6 names that fans carry with today. So, when you argue about Bonds at a bar, or you roll your eyes at an Astros highlight, or you wonder why Pete Rose is still waiting outside the Hall of Fame, you are carrying the weight of a debate that started in broadcast studios and press rooms and commissioners' offices. You are carrying the outcome of 1,000 arguments about what the word cheater actually means. That word is not simple. It never was, but it is real, and it sticks. That is why fans still watch. That is why the debate still burns. And that is why the word legend should never be allowed to hide the word cheater. Not for any of these 6. Not for anyone.